What's going on, everybody? Top 10 Pokemon back, once again bringing you the top Pokemon card auctions of the week recap. Another solid week in Pokemon card auctions. Today's topic of discussion, alt art cards. In the past couple of weeks, we've seen them reach new heights in their both raw and graded prices. I do feel that current bubble that we were seeing, or whatever you want to call it, has kind of popped, and we're trickling back down a little bit in value for a lot of those cards. And we'll also be comparing the crazy price disparity between the CGC 10 and the PSA 10 Pikachu Van Gogh promo cards, and talk about why that might be as well. So stay tuned to the very end. There's something here for everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. A big thank you to today's auction recap sponsor. It's the great people over at lowpopping.com, your source for investment-worthy Pokemon cards. Lowpopping.com never fails to impress with their massive inventory of both vintage and modern Pokemon cards for sale. We're talking high-end pieces consisting of PSA, BGS, and CGC graded cards. But they don't just have graded cards for sale, they also have sealed booster packs, sealed booster boxes, and also theme decks for sale. And lowpopping.com still gives you, the customer, the option to trade for the piece that you must have for your collection. And do not forget, they also have buy now, pay later options available for you to take advantage of as well. With new listings each and every week, you have to go check out lowpopping.com. I will link the website in the description of this video. Go take a look and see what they have available for you today. Alright folks, let's get into this auction recap, starting off with this slew of CGC 10 pristine Pikachu Van Gogh promo cards. And as you can see right here, a majority of these cards are well over $300, some even closer to $350. Whereas the PSA 10 copies of this card have been struggling to get near $200. The most recent sale was for about $185. So, why is there such a massive price disparity between these two graded cards? I believe it's because the PSA 10 population report for this card is astronomical. Every time I look at it, there's like thousands more in the pop report. As of the making of this video, there are 21,683 PSA 10 copies. Compare that to the amount of CGC 10s available, and it's pretty overwhelming. Now, I don't believe it's because it's easier to get a PSA 10. I just believe that everybody, or a majority of these cards, are being sent to PSA, much more so than CGC. I don't know, folks. What's your theory of the price disparity between these two grading card companies for this particular card? Let me know in the comments. Up next, we have a couple of alt arts that kind of have been retracing the past week. Not too crazy, but we have this Sleepy Tyranitar V from Battle Styles that in PSA 10 sold this week for about $320, whereas 2 weeks ago it was selling for like $405. We have the Umbreon VMAX, which sold this week for $1,385. And as you know, the past week or two, it was selling for around $1,650. And then lastly, we saw the Giratina V alt art from Lost Origin, sold this week for $865, whereas a week or two ago, this card sold for over $1,000. So retracing a little bit here, it looks like. I mean, these cards were definitely all the talk in this hobby. So they're coming back down a little bit, at least as PSA 10s, that is. There's one card that's not coming back down. It is the Latios Alt Art GX from Team Up. We saw two sales this week, one for $2,275, another one for $2,426. So this is definitely the king of the alt arts right now. Up next, we have a couple of special delivery cards. Here's a special delivery Pikachu in PSA 10 that sold for $414, while the special delivery Bidoof sold for $585. Couple of Black Label sales. Here is a Charizard V Black Label from the Champions Path Elite Trainer Box, sold for $690. We saw this Japanese Black Label Arceus V-Star sell for $620. Getting into the XY era, here is a Mega Charizard EX from Flashfire that sold as a PSA 10 for $159. And the other one here, this other Mega Charizard EX, sold for $410. Here we have a Japanese limited edition Greninja EX that sold as a PSA 10 for $1,500. Here we have a CGC 10 Pristine Rosa from Cosmic Eclipse that sold for $370, along with this PSA 10 Lycia from Celestial Storm that sold for $560. Here we have the Full Art Dragonite EX from Furious Fist that sold for an even $1,000 this week. Here we have an XY Black Star Promo Venusaur EX. This is a full art card that sold as a PSA 10. It was listed for $2,000, had a best offer accepted price of $1,700, and we're actually going to see this card later on in the video as well. Getting into the vintage portion, here is a CGC 10 Pristine green Card-Ass Pikachu card that sold for $1,693. Here is a first edition base set Bulbasaur as a PSA 10 sold for $1,875, while this Red Cheeks Pikachu from first edition base sold for $4,069. Here we have an unlimited Gengar Holo from Fossil as a PSA 10 sold for $1,344. But then we saw this sale of the reverse Holo Gengar from Legendary Collection as a PSA 10 sold for a staggering $7,357. A very, very low pop card from Legendary Collection, only having 8 PSA 10 examples so far. And then we saw another Legendary Collection card in this reverse holo Alakazam that sold for $1,500. Here we have a CGC 10 Pristine Rockets Zapdos Holo from Gym Challenge that sold for $1,025, along with this CGC 10 Pristine First Edition Blaine's Charizard that sold for $4,150. From Neo Revelation, we saw this Porygon 2 First Edition Holo sell for $1,025, and then we saw 2 Shining Charizards come by as PSA 10s. One sold for $9,700, the other one sold for $12,900. Now, I know the one that sold for more has a newer cert, but man, does that mean it's deserving of over $3,000 more for its price? That seems kind of crazy. Here we have a Japanese promo Charizard from the E-Series that sold as a CGC 10 Pristine for $4,194, and then as a PSA 10 for $3,450. Up next are a slew of very expensive Umbreon cards. Here is the CGC 10 Pristine example from Skyridge that sold for $4,051. Here we have a PSA 10 Karen's Umbreon. This is a Japanese Versus card sold for $1,881. Here we have a CGC 10 Pristine Umbreon EX from EX Unseen Forces, Pop 1 card that sold for $7,300 this week. We also saw this Reverse Holo Espeon from EX Delta Species that sold as a PSA 10 for $510. And this Latios EX from EX Dragon that sold for $799. Along with this Rocket Scyther EX from Team Rocket Returns that sold for $960. Here is a CGC 10 Rocket Suicune EX that sold for $1,875, and then a CGC 9.5 Gold Star Rayquaza that sold for $9,100 this week. We saw a couple of very expensive Snorlax cards. Here is a Black Label Japanese Snorlax Level X card. I believe this is a Domino's Pizza promo card. It sold for $3,850, along with this PSA 10 Rockets Snorlax EX that sold for $2,449. Onto the PWCC weekly auction block, we saw this BGS 10 Pristine Japanese base set Venusaur Holo sold for $1,440. Here is a Japanese Black Label 25th Anniversary Charizard that sold for $1,470. Here is a BGS 9.5 Reverse Holo Squirtle from Legendary Collection that sold for $1,470. And then we also saw a BGS 9.5 Reverse Holo Snorlax from Legendary Collection that sold for $3,600. Here is a PSA 10 Houndoom from Skyridge that sold for $1,710. And then here is that other XY promo Full Art Venusaur EX that sold for $1,830 on here. Here we have the CGC 10 Pristine promo Limited Master Battle Alola Friends card that sold for $2,520. Here is the Holo Rayquaza EX from Dragon Frontiers that sold as a PSA 10 for $2,520. Here is a Reverse Holo Umbreon from Skyridge that sold for an even $3,000. Here we have a CGC 10 Perfect XY promo Poncho wearing Pikachu, where he's wearing Gyarados here. This is a Pop 3 card that sold for $3,600. Up next, we have this Japanese Top Sun Greenback Charizard in PSA 10, sold for $4,560. Here is an Espeon EX from Unseen Forces that sold for $4,920. Here we have a BGS 9 Fan Club Magikarp. This is a 600-point card that sold for $5,160, along with this PSA 10 Japanese Shining Gyarados that sold for an even $6,000. Here we have a Shadowless Blastoise that sold for $6,300, and then this BGS 10 Pristine Japanese base set Charizard sold for $6,300 this week. Here we have a Japanese XY promo 20th anniversary countdown Suzuki-san card in PSA 10 that sold for $6,900. And then we have this 2012 PSA 10 Japanese black and white super rare card set Giratina EX is sold for $8,100. Along with this PSA 10 Corporate History Mewtwo EX is sold for $8,400. Here we have a PSA 10 Japanese Shiny Present Campaign Ho-Oh that sold for $4,560, while the Lugia sold for $9,600 this week. And then, of course, we saw another Japanese XY promo 20th anniversary Festa Pikachu card that sold for $10,200. And then lastly, on PWCC, we saw this Japanese 2009 design contest winner Arceus card in PSA 10 sold for $10,800. And the auction of the week I'm going to give to this tried and true PSA 10 base set unlimited Charizard that sold this week for an even $11,000. Thank you so much, folks, for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Let me know what you thought of these auctions in the comment section below. I'm looking forward to hearing from you. And that's all I got. I'll catch you in my next one.